Okay, good afternoon everyone. Punta na tayo sa visual diagnosis sa Shen, Vitality, Spirit and Emotions. The emotional state of the patient is gauged primarily from the observation of the eyes, the complexion, and the tongue. The observation of these features must of course be closely integrated with the interrogation, listening to the voice and palpation of the pulse. So ito po yung mga ginagamit natin to check the spirit and emotion through observing the eyes, yung complexion ng client, and yung tongue. So the following aspect will be discussed dito, yung eyes, yung complexion, and the tongue. First, the eyes. The observation of the eyes to gauge the emotional state of the patient is based primarily on observation of the lustre and control of the eyes. The lustre of the eyes refers to the brilliance, yung sparkle, yung glitter, and vitality of the normal eye. Eyes with lustre indicate a normal state of the mind and spirit, and generally speaking, the absence of serious emotional problems. Eyes without luster are dull, lack of vitality and sparkle, and look as if they were covered by a mist. This always indicates emotional problems of some nature. The extent of which the eyes lack luster is directly related to the duration and intensity of the emotional problems. That is, the duller the eyes, the deeper and more long-standing are the emotional problems. So, titingnan natin yung mata, examinin natin yung luster ng presentation ng patient. Doon natin makikita the more duller yung eyes, so the longer yung emotional problem ng client. Sa control of the eyes, which refers to the gaze and movement of the eyes. If a person is able to fix their gaze and the eyes do not move, but neither are too fixed, they have control. If a person has a shifty gaze, if the eyes move too much, or if they are fixed in a stare, they are uncontrolled. Eyes without control indicates a relatively serious disturbance of the mind and spirit. Okay? The luster of the eyes is the most important and reliable sign of the state of the mind. So yan po yung sa Shen. And of the emotional state. After the patient sits down for the consultation, sabi niya, I observe the eyes to see if they have luster or not. If the eyes lack luster, it indicates that the patient is suffering from emotional problems. So, correlated po yung luster ng eyes sa emotional condition ng patient. The less the luster, the more long-standing the emotional problem. So, yung luster ng eyes, yun po yung obserbahan natin. Sorry po. Next is the complexion. The complexion with luster is bright, moist, and shining, while a lusterless complexion is dark, dull, and somewhat dry. It is important to note that the luster and the complexion is a diagnostic feature separate from the color of the complexion. For example, an abnormal yellow complexion could be with or without luster. Okay? A complexion with luster indicates that the mind and spirit are relatively unaffected by the emotional problems, while complexion without luster indicates the presence of emotional problem. So, similarly, as for the eyes, the lack of luster of a complexion is directly related to the intensity and duration of the emotional problem. The duller the complexion, the deeper and more long-standing the emotional problem. So, observe po natin din yung sa complexion. plus the luster of the eyes, okay? Sa tongue, one of the main features to look for in the tongue to determine whether the patient is affected by emotional problems or not is the presence or absence of a heart crack. So titingnan po natin sa tongue yung presence of heart crack. A heart crack on the tongue is relatively narrow and it extends throughout the whole length of the tongue to the border of the tip. So narrow po siya na hanggang dun sa tip ng tongue. Of tendency to emotional problems, and the deeper the crack, the more intense the emotional problem. So narrow po siya, pero the deeper the crack, the more intense daw the emotional problem. A second pathological sign to look for on the tongue in emotional problem is a red tip. So titingnan natin yung crack plus presence ng red color on sa tip ng tongue. Emotional stress generally leads to a chi stagnation, and with time, this leads to some heat. As all emotions affect the heart, emotional stress frequently manifests with the red tip of the tongue, which reflects a certain degree of heart heat. The redder the tip, the more intense the emotional problems, and a swelling and red points on the tip indicate an even more severe emotional problem. So titingnan po natin yung crack, yung red coloration. Pag meron pa siyang swelling and red points, mas severe po ang emotional problem. The observation of these three features, yung eyes, complexion, and tongue, should be closely integrated, and each sign should be checked against those of the other two features to give us an idea of the intensity and duration of the emotional problems. So tandaan po natin, to gauge or examine the emotional problem, ang tatlong features na dapat natin ma-check or ma-observe is the eyes, yung complexion, and the tongue. In terms of time scale, when a person is subject to emotional stress, the eyes and their lustre will be the first feature to change. So yung eyes and lustre po yung immediately na mapapansin natin, and yung sa complexion, the second, and the tongue, the last. Although this is just a general rule and there may be variations in practice. Okay, so check natin yung eyes, next yung complexion, and the tongue. Therefore, for example, if the eyes lack luster, but the complexion has luster and the tip of the tongue is not red, it indicates that the emotional problems are of a relatively short duration. So, check natin yung eyes, yung tongue, and yung luster. The eyes, okay? The eyes and the complexion lack luster, and the tongue has a red tip and a deep heart crack. It indicates that the emotional problems suffered by the patient are very deep and long-standing. So, pag affected po yung eyes, yung complexion, lackluster, and the same with the tongue. So, the patient has a very deep and long-standing na po yung emotional problem. As indicated above, when diagnosing the emotional state of the patient, interrogation and observation must be integrated with palpation of the pulse. So, check natin ang pulse din. In terms of the time scale, the pulse will actually be the first to change. To summarize, therefore, the time scale of the changes observed in emotional problems is as follows. First, yung pulse. Second, yung eyes. And the third is the complexion. And the last is the tongue. So, observation of Shen, yung spirit. Compare natin yung with spirit and without spirit. Sa complexion, sa with spirit has luster, while sa without spirit, no luster or dull. Pag chinek natin sa eyes, yung with spirit have luster and brightness. Yung without spirit, dull and clouded. Sa state of mind, Yung with lustre, alert siya and clear, but without spirit, dull and depressed. Sa breathing, with spirit, even siya. Without spirit, labored po yung breathing. Okay? So, thank you po for your attention.